Hey, what's up everyone? This is Mr. Mo. Welcome to Matrix with Mo, and today I've got a fun little video for you about microprong. Microprong, of course, is a very popular setting style today, so I was playing around with different ways of doing it, and I found a pretty cool trick just by digging around in the burrmark library the other day, and I noticed the way they do some of their microprong rings. They have this kind of unique cutter, which you can see here. It's kind of like an airplane shape or something like that. Anyway, I thought it was really neat and decided I'd put together this little video for you. So what I did is I took the cutter from the burrmark library and I manipulated their cutter a little bit and made this little set here of 9 different cutters that ranges in size from a 1.2 millimeter stone here all the way up to a 2 millimeter stone on this end. So I'll go ahead and highlight those stones and hit F6 for you, and you can see here are the sizes. Goes all the way from 1.2 millimeters to 2 millimeters, and this little set allows me to kind of plug and play as I'm working depending on what size stones I'm using. Now there are some limitations to using these cutters. It really works best on rows of stones that are all the same size. If you have different size stones that taper, this cutter might not work best for that, and you might as well just use the builder, microprong builder, to do tapering stones. Or on rings or shanks, anything that has a lot of curvature, this might not work very well either. And that's because of the way this cutter works. It's got the U cut and the channel cut built into one cutter, which is one of the neat features about it. It also has this nice rounded fillet here at the corners, and the bottom's nice and smooth and rounded as well, which are the few features that I really like about this cutter. As I said, your mileage may vary, so as long as you have a straight row or maybe even just a gentle curve like I've got on this ring rail here that I used curve from two views to create that. And I'll show you how these work, just making a simple ring here. So I'll grab this profile, we'll hit F6 and we'll go to our profile placer. And I've already made a profile that I like to use for microprong, and it's one of these low dome. Basically I just took a rectangle and modified it, just trimmed it up, filleted the corners, and then split it near the top all the way across, and then did a blend curve there to get a nice smooth kind of low dome here. So I'm going to set my width and height. Let's do a 1.7 for both the width and the height, and that will allow me to use 1.3 millimeter stone, because I want to have at least 0.2 millimeters on either side of the stone here. So if I use 1.7 width, that's going to give me 0.2 on each side of a 1.3 millimeter stone. And then I like to basically just have like a square profile, so I just made my height 1.7 as well. So I'll go ahead and hit enter on that, and then we'll run our sweep one with history, and we'll just get our simple shank out here in the viewport. And I'll change my shade mode so we can see my ISO curves here, because really what I need is an ISO curve running down the middle here so that I can do my gem on curve. Now I think from the way I built this profile, for whatever reason, there is no ISO curve running down the middle of this, so I'm going to have to put one there. And the way I'm going to do that, I guess, I'll go over here to curve and extract ISO curve, and I'm going to turn this on red so we can see first, and then I'll toggle this, and I will turn on my intersection snap, and that way I can get an intersection snap right here on the top middle of the shank. Press enter there, And then I'll do extract ISO curve again on this surface, and I'll toggle again to go the other way, and then I'll just snap right there in that midpoint, and that'll give me my ISO curve right where I need it to be to run gem on curve. But before I do that, I'm going to look in my side view, or sorry, through finger view, and then I'm going to decide that I don't want microprong setting going all the way around this, so I might just trim this curve right around here or so. So I'm just going to use a good old polyline, and we'll just draw a line straight across. And maybe I'll drag that down just a hair. Let me turn my snaps off. Right about there is good. And I'll hide my metal 1. And I'll select all this, and we'll go to trim. And I'll just trim that bottom part away. Okay, and then I'll just delete this curve, and I'm ready to roll. Okay, so I'll select this curve now and run my gem on curve with F6. Alright, and here in the builder I will grab my start position, drag that all the way down to 0. In position, we'll move that to 100%. My spacing's defaulted at 0.2, that's good. And let me turn on my shank again, and we'll just talk here for a second. So I decided I wanted to use 1.3 millimeter stone, so I'll go ahead and we'll make that adjustment here. So I'll type 1.3, press enter. And then I definitely want to put on my gem tops here because I want the stones to be down in the surface. So I'll click gem tops. And then since I've got a rounded profile here on the top of my shank, I probably would need to drop these stones down even more than just using gem tops. So I'm going to come down to my Z offset, and I'm going to drop this down negative 0.2, and that should be plenty. So I'll hit enter on that, and then I'm going to go ahead and hide red because we don't need that anymore. And so we're using 1.3 millimeter stones, and so I know that the smallest one's 1.2. So this is the cutter sized appropriately for 1.3 millimeter stones. So I'm just going to delete everything else here. Don't need those. And in fact, I don't even need the stone anymore, so I can delete that as well. And then what I'll do is I'll take this cutter, and we'll go to utilities, and we'll center this up. So we'll center object, and to get that right at F4, and that is for the next step, because what I'm going to do here is we're going to run orient to gem on this. So we'll go to the gems menu, orient to gem, click there, we'll left click and highlight all my stones. That goes here. My object is the cutter, that's going to go here, and then I'm going to turn on this option right here called show guide, and what that's going to do is that's going to put a stone, 1.3 millimeter stone on the gray layer right there, and that stone is actually locked down, so you can't click on it or drag it or do anything to it unless you hit the unlock, or actually what you do is you type unlock up here in the command line. So I don't really need to unlock it just yet, because what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show this cutter again, and then I might go to my ghosted mode, and I want to drag this cutter up slightly so that I have about the last 25%. If you break up your stone into quarters, I'm going to say that I want the last quarter of that stone peeking out the bottom, and that's so that the floor of my channel and my U-cuts are going to be right about there on the rest of my stones up here on my shank. And then I'll use a gem cutter and clean out the hole for the culet so it can drop down in there. So we'll have to do that at a later step, but for now I've got everything set up to do my orient to gem. So all I have to do here is hit set to gems, And that should be exactly what I need it to be for my cut here. And so as I mentioned before, this little cutter is pretty neat in the fact that it has the U cut and the channel cut built in, and then it also has this nice feature where it's going to leave the prong nice and rounded here on this end. So let's go ahead and run our Boolean difference and see how this looks. Select everything orange except for that one there, and we'll just drop that in. And I'll do one by one, and I don't need to keep these, so we'll just hit do Boolean. So once this is done, I'll still have to go in with the Microprong builder and split these prongs apart, and then I'll have to go in with the gem cutters as well to make my through hole. Okay, so that works pretty well. I really liked how nice and rounded this leaves the prong here on this inside edge. And if I had the stones, you can see it's got a nice surface down here. This would be easy to polish. Everything's level. You don't have any offset between the U cut and the channel cut. And it even leaves this little ridge here down the center, which you won't really see that once you pop your stones in there at the bench, but I think it looks kind of cool as is, so I'm really liking this little cutter. Okay, so for the last couple steps here, I'll show my gems again, and we'll go to our microprong cutter here in the cutters menu, and we'll select all those stones and we'll drop those in here. And then I'm going to switch this to the middle and also change the shape of this cutter to this V601 shape. That's the one I like to do my little prong splitting cut there. So first thing I'll do is I'll change the drop. We'll drag this up a little bit, and then I'll definitely need to change my width here. I like to use about 0.2 on this. And then since we have our profile shape have that nice rounded top, it might be a good idea to bend the cutter. Not absolutely necessary, but I'm going for style points here, so we'll just do a little bit of a bend. Let's say about 0.2, 0.3. And then we might have to readjust our drop. And it's probably a good idea to go ahead and turn your Boolean on and then click surface here in the builder and then click on your ring. That way you get a preview of what the cutter is actually doing. So I might expand this view. That way we can see what's going on here as I adjust my drop. See, there's bend. Where's the drop? I'm thinking that's going to be this little cube right here. So we'll drop this down and we'll give it a second and it'll update. Okay, so the idea behind splitting this prong apart is we definitely don't need to go too deep on this, because the rest of that work can be done at the bench. We just really need a guide for doing most of the work for us till we get the ring cast and ready to go at the bench. So that looks pretty good to my eye. About 0.6 is what I've got on my drop here. Now a couple things to note when you're using this builder. For whatever reason, I'm going to turn Boolean off here, and you can see that this cutter on this side looks pretty good, but if I look over on this side, it's got this weird bend going this way, and I'm not quite sure why it does that. If anybody knows, please feel free to email me and let me know what I'm doing wrong, if I'm doing something wrong. But what I usually do in this case is I'll just hit enter and I'll grab these guys and I'll ungroup them, And I'll just delete this one because it's weird. And then on this opposite side, I think that this needs to come down a little bit because there's not enough metal here for this prong for my taste. So what I like to do in this case is either two things. I usually would either drop this down as best I could, even though it's at a funny angle. It might take a little bit of adjustment to get it to look right, having to move these around slightly to get everything lined up and be the right depth and the right angle and everything. So if that's too much fiddling around for you, you can just delete these cutters altogether on the ends and then just split that apart at the bench with the jeweler saw or with gravers or however you like to do it. So whatever works best for you in this case. I'll just mirror this one over because I think that looks all right. So I'll do mirror and I'll just hold shift to make sure that's in the right spot. And then if that's all looking good, you can run your Boolean difference. One by one, don't need to keep the cutters, so we'll just run that. Okay, so let's take a look. Okay, so we split those prongs. That looks pretty nice. So as far as the last step here, we just need to make our through hole. So I'll select my stones and we'll run our gem cutter. And there's a couple things you can do here depending on how you like to set things up. If I'm going to notch the prongs, which sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, and it just depends on if I think I've got matching stones and I think I've got everything at the right height here as far as the cutters, then I'll go ahead and notch these. If I'm not sure about the stones or if I want to have the most flexibility, maybe that would just use a straight cylinder to punch the hole through and that way not notch these prongs at all. But even if I do notch them, I'm going to make a couple adjustments so that I don't cut away too much metal here. And so the first thing I'll do is I'll scale my girdle scale down to 95%. And then my girdle width, I'm going to change that from 5% all the way down to 1%. And that way, I'll go ahead and hit enter and we'll hide the stones. What that's going to do is that's just going to barely make a little notch in that prong. And so that you still have plenty of wiggle room at the bench if you need to adjust, the height up or down, or remove more metal, whatever you need to do. Okay, so I'll go ahead and run my Boolean difference on those. Oh, forgot to do one thing. Need to make sure those through holes come all the way through. So let's do that again. Okay, there we go. All right, perfect. So once again, this little cutter is something I found from burrmark library. I had to make a few adjustments to it to get it to be usable for my workflow. And I have that whole set of 9. So if you would like to have these cutters, feel free to message me, and I'd be happy to send you a download link. Otherwise, you can grab one from the burrmark library and make your own. All right, guys. Appreciate your time. Thanks for watching.